The first time Adaora saw Lagos, it was from the back seat of a black SUV that smelled like new leather and loneliness. The man beside her didn't speak. Obinna Okeke, her new husband, the one she'd married barely 24 hours ago in a small, quiet ceremony her mother called a blessing from above. But Adaora knew better. It wasn't love. It was rescue. Her father's debts had swallowed everything. The family farm was gone. Her younger siblings couldn't continue school, and the shame was eating her mother alive. Then came Obinna's proposal, a cold transaction masked as charity. He needed a wife to calm his family's suspicions and satisfy shareholders who doubted his family values. Adaora was perfect. Educated, humble, harmless. The SUV stopped before a tall glass house in Lekki. Obinna opened the door, motioning for her to step out, but his eyes never met hers. "This is where you'll stay," he said. "My staff will attend to anything you need. I'll be away most of the time. I like peace and privacy, I hope you understand." His words were precise, like a man giving office instructions. Adaora only nodded. Her chest ached, but she managed a faint smile. "I understand," she whispered. Days turned into weeks. Their lives were separate even under one roof. He worked late. She dined alone. His presence was silence, his absence louder. The mansion echoed with loneliness, a kind she had never known even in poverty. But sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, she'd catch him standing at the balcony, staring at her reflection on the pool water, a flicker of something human in his eyes, quickly buried under pride. One night, during a thunderstorm, the generator failed. The house was swallowed in darkness. She panicked, searching for a candle. Then a hand touched hers, firm, warm, trembling. Obinna's voice was low. "You're scared of the dark?" She nodded. "Only when I can't see who's beside me." Their silence said everything words could not. He lit a candle, its flame dancing between them. For a moment, the proud businessman looked like a boy who'd forgotten how to love. But before the air could thicken, he stepped back. "Good night," he said coldly, walking away. Adaora stared at the fading light, whispering to herself, "You can't break what was never whole." Yet somewhere deep inside, something had cracked, and neither of them knew it yet. But the darkness that night had lit a spark that would soon burn through every wall between them. Obinna kept his distance. Every morning, he left before dawn and returned after midnight, moving around Adaora as though she were invisible. To him, their marriage was an arrangement, not affection. He slept in the guest room. He barely spoke. He didn't even notice the small things, like how she made his coffee stronger on days she knew he had board meetings, or how she pressed his shirts herself when the laundry service delayed. Adaora told herself not to care. But love, real love, isn't something you plan. It grows in the quiet moments you try to ignore. One Friday evening, the rain refused to stop. Adaora sat by the dining table, reading an old novel, when she heard a crash in the living room, the sound of glass shattering. She rushed out to find Obinna standing by his laptop, fists clenched, veins sharp on his neck. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. He didn't look at her. "I'm fine," but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. On the screen was an email from his client, a contract termination notice. A multimillion naira deal slipping away. He'd worked on it for months. Adaora noticed a folder labeled Northland Documents on his desk, half open, papers scattered. She looked closer and froze. "Obinna, this isn't complete," she said. "You sent the wrong file." He blinked. "What?" "You uploaded the draft, not the final report. The client will think you're unprepared." He turned sharply. "How do you even know that?" She hesitated. "I used to assist a local NGO with reports. I recognize formatting errors." He stared at her, suspicion and surprise blending into silence. "It's too late now," he muttered. "The presentation is tomorrow morning." That night, when he finally went to bed, Adaora stayed up. She found the right file among the piles, corrected missing attachments, and printed backup copies. Then, as dawn stretched through the curtains, she dressed quietly and followed the driver to his office. Obinna stood before the boardroom, surrounded by executives and investors. His confidence wavered. The missing report could ruin him. Then, just as the meeting began, the doors opened. Adaora walked in, calm, graceful, holding the file against her chest. "You forgot this," she said gently. The room went silent. Obinna's eyes widened. She placed the documents on the table and whispered, "Page 4 has the revised projections. Start there." He didn't know what shocked him more, that she came or that she knew exactly what he needed. When he began to speak, she stayed by the wall, quiet but firm, until the room started to nod along. Her presence steadied him. After the meeting, the investors applauded. The deal was saved. He turned to thank her, but she was already walking toward the exit. "Why did you do that?" he asked when he caught up to her. She smiled faintly. "Because we share a name now. When you fall, I fall too." For the first time, Obinna had no words. Something in his chest softened, a warmth he hadn't felt in years. That night, he didn't sleep in the guest room. He stayed in the living room, replaying her voice in his head. Maybe love wasn't loud after all. Maybe it was quiet, like her, slipping in when pride wasn't watching. After that day in the boardroom, something quietly changed in the house, like a wound starting to heal from within. Obinna still kept his distance, but not in the same cold way. His eyes lingered a little longer when she passed. His voice, though still guarded, had lost its sharpness. He didn't know how to say thank you, but his silence no longer hurt, it waited. Adaora noticed. She noticed everything. He began eating at the dining table again, though he never said why. He'd come home late and find dinner still warm, covered neatly. Sometimes he'd find her asleep on the couch, waiting for him, a book open beside her hand. He'd stand there quietly, staring, before gently removing her glasses, covering her with his jacket, and walking away before dawn. He didn't know she sometimes opened her eyes after he left, heart pounding with the realization that the man she married might finally be seeing her. One Saturday morning, she found him sitting outside, shirt sleeves rolled up, looking lost in thought. "Do you ever rest?" she asked softly. "Rest is for people who have peace," he said without looking at her. "And you don't." He smiled faintly. "Peace isn't something you buy, Adaora. It's something you lose once you've seen too much." His words sat heavy between them. She wanted to ask what he meant, but his gaze turned to the horizon, eyes wet with something that wasn't rain. She said nothing, only placed a cup of tea beside him, and quietly walked away. That evening, a storm hit again. The windows rattled, thunder rolled. Adaora was in the kitchen when she heard him on the phone, voice low, strained. "I said no," he snapped. "I'm not reopening that chapter. Tell them to drop it." He turned and froze when he saw her watching from the doorway. Their eyes met for a heartbeat too long. Something raw flickered in his fear, pain, maybe guilt. "You shouldn't eavesdrop," he said, his tone softer than his words. "I wasn't. I was worried," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You worry too much. You hide too much," she replied before she could stop herself. The air thickened. He looked at her, really looked at her, as if seeing a stranger who somehow knew all his secrets. For the first time, he didn't walk away. He just said, quietly, "Good night, Adaora," and left the room. But that night, sleep refused to come to either of them. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, haunted by her voice, the softness that felt like a mirror. She lay awake too, realizing that she wasn't just living with him anymore, she was slowly slipping into his world, into the quiet cracks of his soul. By morning, something invisible had shifted. He offered her a ride to the market. He asked about her family. When she laughed at one of his awkward jokes, he didn't hide his smile fast enough. Love was creeping in, patient and uninvited, breaking through every wall he had built. He didn't see it coming. Neither did she. But fate did, and it was only getting started. The house had grown warmer these days. Laughter had started to echo in corners where silence once lived. Adaora didn't realize how much had changed until the morning Obinna invited her to accompany him to a charity gala at the Civic Towers. It was the first time he'd ever asked her to stand beside him in public. "Are you sure?" she asked, almost whispering. He nodded. You're my wife. You belong there. Her heart fluttered. For once, the word wife didn't sound like an obligation. It sounded like acknowledgement. The evening came with flashing lights and the hum of rich Lagos voices. Adaora looked breathtaking in a simple emerald gown. She didn't have the expensive polish of the other women there, but she had something they didn't, grace that couldn't be bought. Obinna noticed. Though he didn't say it, his hand lingered on the small of her back as they entered the hall. For the first time, she felt proud. She belonged, or so she thought. Halfway through the evening, Obinna was called aside by a group of investors, leaving her alone at the table. That was when she heard the whispers. Is that her? The village girl he married because his mother pressured him? Poor thing. She must still smell like firewood. Laughter followed, sharp as glass. Adaora pretended not to hear. But when one of them, a tall woman with diamond earrings, leaned closer and said, "Some men marry pity, not passion," the words sliced through her composure. Before she could reply, Obinna returned. The woman smiled sweetly. Obinna, your wife is humble. Quite the contrast from your usual type. Everyone laughed. Adaora's eyes darted to her husband, waiting, begging, for him to say something, anything. But he didn't. He just smiled tightly, the way powerful men do when they don't want drama. Please excuse us, he said calmly, pulling Adaora aside. In the hallway, she faced him, trembling. Why didn't you say something?
He looked away.
It's not worth it. Not worth it. Her voice cracked. They insulted me, Obinna. They insulted your wife. It's better to stay quiet than make a scene. She shook her head, tears blurring her vision. You're ashamed of me, aren't you? He didn't answer. That silence, that heavy, prideful silence, was her answer. She turned and walked out, ignoring the flash of cameras, the rain that had begun to fall outside. He called after her once, but his voice drowned in thunder. When he got home that night, her things were gone. The wedding ring lay on the dining table beside a note. I didn't marry you for money, Obinna. I married you because I believed maybe kindness could teach you to love again. But I was wrong. You can't teach a man who's afraid to feel. For the first time in years, Obinna's chest ached. Not from pride, from loss. He touched the ring, and the silence he'd once loved filled the house again. But now, it suffocated. Outside, the rain poured harder, as if the sky itself wept for them. Obinna didn't sleep that night. Every corner of the house echoed with her absence. The empty chair at the table, the untouched teacup, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the hallway. He tried to drown himself in work, but even the numbers on his screen blurred into memories. Her smile, her calm voice, the night she said, "When you fall, I fall too." Days turned into weeks. The mansion became a graveyard of silence. He began missing meetings, showing up late, barking at employees. His assistant once found him sitting in the conference room long after a presentation ended, staring at Adaora's handwriting on a forgotten notepad. Every strong man hides a broken boy. That line undid him. He realized then he wasn't ashamed of her. He was ashamed of himself. All these years, he'd believed vulnerability was weakness, love was distraction, and pride was armor. But Adaora had taught him that kindness wasn't weakness. It was strength. When news reached him that she had returned to her village, he didn't think twice. He packed a small bag and drove himself, leaving Lagos before dawn. The journey was long and humbling. The sleek roads of Lekki gave way to red earth, rusted roofs, and children chasing tires down dusty paths. For the first time, he saw where she came from, a world she never hid, one that had shaped her grace. He found her behind a small community school, teaching a group of children under a tree. Her laughter floated through the air like a hymn. She wore a simple wrapper and a faded blouse, but she looked radiant, freer than he had ever seen her. When she saw him, the chalk slipped from her hand. "Obinna," she whispered. He nodded, his voice trembling. "I didn't come for pride. I came for peace." The children giggled, sensing something sacred, then quietly left as he walked closer. I was a fool, he said. I let silence speak when I should have stood for you. I thought protecting my name mattered more than protecting your heart. She folded her arms, trying to stay strong. Obinna, I don't hate you, but I can't keep bleeding to prove I care. I know, he said softly. That's why I'm here, to learn how to love the way you did. Without fear. Without measure. He dropped to his knees in the red mud, unbothered by the watching villagers. I can rebuild the company 100 times over, Adaora. But without you, it's just walls and noise. Tears filled her eyes. For the first time, his pride bowed. He continued, voice breaking, You were never a contract, Adaora. You were the deal life gave me when I stopped believing in love. Silence stretched between them, the same silence that once divided them now wrapped around them like a promise. When she finally knelt beside him, placing her hand on his cheek, he broke, sobbing softly into her palm. And in that muddy field, the proud Lagos businessman found his redemption, not in wealth or success, but in the forgiveness of the woman he once called a convenience. 3 weeks later, Lagos woke up to a different kind of sunrise, one that didn't burn, but healed. Obinna and Adaora returned quietly, without announcements or grand gestures. The world didn't need to know what had happened between them. Love, they'd learned, doesn't always need witnesses. Sometimes it just needs truth. The mansion in Lekki felt different now. Gone were the shadows that used to swallow the rooms. The silence that once screamed had softened into peace. Adaora moved through the house with lightness, humming as she rearranged flowers, leaving notes on his desk like, Remember to eat, or The world won't end if you rest. Obinna, once obsessed with perfection, started coming home early. He'd find her in the kitchen barefoot, flower on her cheek, and his heart would ache, not with guilt anymore, but with gratitude. One evening, as rain tapped softly on the windows, he found her on the balcony reading by candlelight, the same way he had seen her that first night months ago. Only this time, he didn't hesitate. He walked behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. You still like reading in the dark? He teased. She smiled. Maybe I just like the calm that comes before the light. He turned her gently to face him. I was the darkness, Adaora. She shook her head. No, you were just lost in it. For a long moment, neither spoke. The city lights blinked below them. The air smelled of rain and forgiveness. I never thanked you, he finally said, for saving me, not just the company but me. She placed a hand on his chest. You don't thank someone for seeing you. You just keep being seen. He kissed her forehead, soft, trembling. You make me want to be better. Not richer. Not smarter. Just better. Tears filled her eyes, but they weren't from pain this time. Then I think we're both finally home. From that day, love stopped being a stranger in their house. They became each other's routine. Morning coffee shared in laughter, late-night talks about dreams, gentle apologies that no longer needed pride to hide behind. Obinna began funding schools in rural areas, the same kind Adaora had taught in. Every child deserves a chance, he'd tell people, but everyone knew it was her influence, speaking through him. She became the quiet soul behind his success, not as his shadow, but as his peace. And whenever people asked how they made it work after such a cold beginning, Adaora would smile and say, Love wasn't part of our deal, but God had other plans. On their first wedding anniversary, he surprised her with a small wooden plaque on the balcony, the spot where their story truly began. It read, To the woman who taught me that silence can heal and pride can kneel. Love wasn't part of our deal, but it became the only thing that mattered. That night, as fireworks shimmered faintly over the Lagos skyline, Adaora leaned into him and whispered, You know what's funny? What? He asked. I married you to save my family, and somehow you ended up saving my heart. Obinna smiled, pulling her closer. No, Adaora. You saved mine first. The rain started again, gentle, cleansing, holy, washing away every scar, every fear, every wall they'd ever built. And in that soft downpour, they stood together, proof that sometimes the most beautiful love stories aren't born from passion or perfection. but from two broken people who chose to stay long enough to heal each other.